The heavy metal doors start closing. Thousands of pounds of iron trap you inside. Spikes press against your skin. You beg for death, but deep inside, you know it's not coming anytime soon. Not until days later. This was the Iron Maiden torture. And guess what? This wasn't even the most horrific one. There were tortures far more sinister, some inflicted for crimes as small as mere suspicion. You're about to discover 7 torture devices so twisted, so ingeniously cruel, they make modern horror movies look like children's cartoons. But here's what's truly disturbing. The 7th one is still used today. Device 1. The Brazen Bull. Picture this. You're locked inside a bronze bull, and they're lighting a fire underneath you. But that's not the worst part. This wasn't just any bronze statue. The brazen bull stood 6 feet tall, hollow inside with a door in the side just big enough for a human body. The bronze was thick enough to withstand extreme heat, but thin enough to conduct it efficiently. Once you're locked inside, they'd light a fire underneath. The bronze would heat up like an oven, literally roasting you alive. But here's where it gets truly sick. The Greeks who invented it had a twisted sense of artistry. The bull was designed with acoustic pipes that turned your screams into what sounds like a bull roaring. Your agony became entertainment. They wanted to dehumanize the victim completely. Your human screams became animal sounds, making it easier for crowds to watch without feeling guilty. This punishment was reserved for the worst criminals in ancient Greece, murderers, traitors, and those who committed crimes against the gods. But wait until you hear the twisted irony of its first victim. The inventor, Pericles, demonstrated it for the tyrant Phalaris by climbing inside himself. Phalaris was so impressed, he immediately used it on Pericles. The creator became the first victim. Victims would start sweating profusely within minutes. The bronze conducted heat so efficiently that you'd literally cook from the outside in. Death came from dehydration, heat stroke, or simply being cooked alive, but it could take over an hour of pure agony. But what if I told you the next device could make victims beg to be put in the brazen bull instead? Device 2. The Judas Cradle. Imagine being slowly lowered onto a pyramid-shaped spike. The Judas Cradle wasn't designed to kill you quickly, quite the opposite. Picture a wooden pyramid, about 2 feet tall, with a sharp point at the top. But not knife-sharp, just pointed enough to penetrate flesh slowly. The victim sat above it, suspended by ropes, with weights attached to their legs. Here's where it gets diabolical. You're lowered just enough so the point barely penetrates. Then, they add weights to your legs, one by one. Gravity becomes your enemy, pulling you down onto the spike millimeter by millimeter. Spanish inquisitors loved this device for suspected heretics, witches, and Jews who refused to convert. The beauty of it for them? No blood, no obvious external wounds, perfect for extractors who needed to keep their hands clean. But here's the real psychological torture. You could potentially save yourself by confessing to whatever crime they accused you of. The executioner would pause, ask for your confession, then add another weight when you refused. Most people were innocent, creating an impossible choice: confess to a lie and face other punishments, or endure unimaginable agony. The spike would slowly penetrate through the rectum or vagina, tearing internal organs gradually. Victims reported feeling like they were being split in half from the inside. Most died from internal bleeding, but some survived for days, hanging there as infection set in. The worst part? You remained conscious throughout, feeling every millimeter of penetration. But believe it or not, there's something even more calculating about our next device. Device 3. The Iron Maiden. Everyone thinks they know the Iron Maiden. A coffin with spikes inside, right? Wrong. The real horror is much more calculated. This wasn't just a spike-filled coffin. The authentic Iron Maiden was a hollow metal statue, usually shaped like a woman, with doors that opened to reveal the spiked interior. But here's what most people get wrong. The spikes weren't placed randomly. Medieval engineers calculated exactly where to position each spike, through the eyes, shoulders, thighs, and stomach, to cause maximum agony while avoiding vital organs. The door would close slowly, spike by spike penetrating the victim. There was just enough room inside that the spikes wouldn't immediately kill you. They'd pierce about 2 to 3 inches deep, enough to cause excruciating pain and bleeding, but not enough to hit your heart or major arteries. The real torture was the anticipation. You could see exactly where each spike would go. This was reserved for nobles who committed treason, military deserters, and those accused of serious crimes against the crown. It was considered a gentleman's torture, more dignified than public execution. Victims would be conscious throughout, feeling every spike slowly penetrating their flesh. Death came from blood loss over several hours, or infection days later if they opened the doors. But here's the twisted psychology. The Iron Maiden was more about fear than actual use. The mere sight of it made most people confess immediately. It rarely needed to be used because just showing it to prisoners broke their will completely. However, our next device was the complete opposite. It was used constantly, and it turned torture into a public spectacle that families attended. Device 4. The breaking wheel. You're tied to a large wooden wheel, and someone starts swinging a hammer at your limbs. But they're not trying to kill you. Not yet. Picture a wagon wheel, 6 feet in diameter, with gaps between the spokes. The victim would be tied spread-eagled across it, with their limbs positioned directly over the gaps. This wasn't random. Those gaps were crucial for what came next. The executioner would use an iron hammer, starting with the arms. They'd swing down hard, breaking the bone against the gap in the wheel with a sickening crack that the crowd could hear from hundreds of feet away. They followed a specific order: right arm, right leg, left leg. 2 breaks per limb, 1 at the wrist ankle, 1 at the elbow knee. That's 8 breaks minimum, but they could go up to 40 breaks for the worst criminals. Murderers, highwaymen, and rapists got this treatment. But also anyone who committed crimes that broke society's rules. The punishment literally broke them in return. Here's the disturbing part that shows how twisted humanity can get. The crowd would count along with each break. Children were brought to watch as a lesson. Vendors sold food and drinks like it was entertainment. Families made it a day out. But the breaking wasn't the end. After destroying every major bone, they'd weave your shattered limbs through the wheel spokes and hoist you up for public display. Your bones would heal in twisted, impossible positions. You could survive like this for days, your broken body serving as a living warning to others. Some victims lived for a week, their twisted forms visible from miles away. But somehow, believe it or not, some victims actually preferred this to our next device. And when you hear what it involves, you'll understand why. Device 5. The boats, scaphism. This one sounds almost peaceful. The boats. 2 boats, actually. But this Persian invention might be the most horrific thing humans ever created. 2 narrow boats, carved to fit together like a coffin. But instead of burying you, they'd trap you between them with only your head, hands, and feet exposed to the elements. First, they'd strip you naked and cover you in milk and honey from head to toe. Then comes the force feeding. More milk and honey poured down your throat until you develop violent diarrhea. This was reserved for the absolute worst criminals in ancient Persia. Those who murdered family members, committed treason against the king, or desecrated temples. It was called the most dishonorable death possible. But here's where Persian ingenuity turned truly evil. Your own waste, combined with the milk and honey, creates the perfect breeding ground for insects. Flies, wasps, beetles, they're attracted to the sweet mixture coating your body. Day 1. Insects start biting. Day 3. They lay eggs in your wounds. Day 5. Maggots hatch and start eating you alive from the inside. You're kept alive with daily feedings of milk and honey, forced to endure every moment. One Persian criminal named Mithridates survived 17 days in the boats. By day 10, witnesses could see maggots moving under his skin like waves. Victims would go insane from the combination of pain, helplessness, and watching their own body being consumed. Some developed gangrene. Others died from septic shock. But the worst part? The complete mental breakdown from being eaten alive while conscious. Yet somehow, our 6th device managed to be even more creative in its psychological cruelty. Device 6. The rat torture. A simple pot. Some rats. A heat source. How bad could it be? A large metal pot or bucket, big enough to hold 6 to 8 hungry rats. The victim would be strapped to a table, completely immobilized, with the pot placed upside down on their stomach or chest. Here's the diabolical simplicity. They'd heat the bottom of the pot with burning coals. As the metal got hotter, the rats inside would panic. Spanish inquisitors used this on suspected heretics and those who refused to confess. Chinese dynasties used it on political prisoners. The beauty of it for interrogators? It was completely controllable. They could stop the heat at any time. But here's what made it psychologically devastating. You'd watch them light the coals, feel the pot warming on your skin, hear the rats getting more frantic as the temperature rose. Most people broke before the rats even started digging. But for those who didn't confess in time, rats are incredibly strong diggers. Their claws can tear through wood, so human flesh is nothing. When panicked by heat, they become frenzied, clawing and biting with desperate strength. With nowhere else to go, they'd do the only thing they could: claw their way down, through your body. The rats would tear through skin, muscle, and into the abdominal cavity within minutes. Victims described feeling like they were being eaten alive from the inside. Those who survived described nightmares about rats for years afterward. But here's what made it worse than simple torture. This wasn't a death sentence. It was designed to extract confessions. The moment you confessed, they'd remove the pot. This gave victims hope, making the torture even more psychologically devastating. Now, for the final device, and this one will shock you because it's still debated as acceptable today. Device 7. Waterboarding. Yes, waterboarding. The technique that makes headlines today was perfected centuries ago during the Spanish Inquisition. A wooden board angled at 10 to 15 degrees, with restraints for wrists, ankles, and chest. The victim's head would be at the lower end, tilted back. A cloth would be placed over the face. Then comes the water, not a lot, just enough to soak the cloth. As water pours over the cloth covering your nose and mouth, your body is absolutely convinced you're drowning. Spanish inquisitors called it toca and used it on thousands during the Inquisition. Suspected heretics, converted Jews, anyone who challenged church authority. It was considered clean torture because it left no marks. But here's why it was so devastatingly effective. Your brain doesn't understand that you're not actually underwater. Every instinct screams that you're dying. Your body floods with adrenaline. Your heart rate spikes. You struggle against the restraints with superhuman strength. The gag reflex triggers. You can't breathe. Panic floods your system. Unlike other devices, this attacks your mind directly. There's no physical pain, no broken bones, no wounds. Just pure, primal terror repeated over and over. Most people broke after 30 seconds. During the Spanish Inquisition alone, over 8,800 people were waterboarded. The success rate for extracting confessions was over 95%. Victims developed severe PTSD, panic attacks triggered by water or wet sounds, and many never fully recovered mentally. Some preferred physical torture because at least that pain was real. Waterboarding attacks reality itself. What makes this different from every other device we've covered? It leaves no physical marks, no permanent damage, no evidence. The victim looks completely unharmed. The truly horrifying part? Some of these techniques are still debated, still used, still considered acceptable by certain governments today. We are almost about to hit 100 subscribers, so please subscribe and leave a like and a comment. That would just take a minute for you but would make my day.